Good evening. Greetings, spiritual warriors. Welcome to Spiritual Warriorship, where we discuss and read from, you hear from Bhaktitirtha Swami books. His Holiness Bhaktitirtha Swami. And we will be celebrating his appearance day on Sunday by the Vedic calendar. His Tirtha Day this year is March 13th. So many people in many places will be praising him, glorifying him, and remembering how he was instrumental in their spiritual growth and in their lives. And we're so fortunate, aren't we? Every week we have the opportunity to glorify him. Every week we're hearing from him as he, through these classes which were transcribed and put into book form, his words endeavor to lead us to a transcendental level in order to get out of this prison, escape. Didn't we study about the perfect escape? And now we're studying about the need for constant mindfulness. We're in Spiritual Warrior 5. The chapter, I believe, is 5, forgive me. And the title is The Need for Constant Mindfulness. Is anybody in the chat room yet? Yeah? Who's there?
Bhuvan, Mohan, and David.
Okay, David. Okay, welcome. Excuse me. I hope those of you who have been with us the past couple weeks hearing from this about mindfulness have begun to practice. So I want to I'm not going to do a big review. I don't do that anymore. But just where he tells us that when we function with a mindful consciousness during our daily duties at home and at work, which may seem quite tedious and unfulfilling, and some of us know how that can be, such duties can take on a whole different perspective because we see them in relationship to some aspect of the Creator. And that reminds me of an assignment I had given, because he quotes in this chapter, Bhaktitirtha Swami quotes from a number of Bhagavad Gita verses, and I had suggested that we visit those verses in Bhagavad Gita and read the purport. Well, to be perfectly honest and truthful, I still have the list here, but I myself did not get to read the purports. I'm hoping some of you were a little more attentive and mindful and were able to do that. And just another point he makes, where we're going, we started reading, he says, he's sharing with us in this particular chapter a meditation from his book, The Beggar 2. And the meditation is entitled, Well Done, My Darling, Well Done. Now, why is he doing this? He's doing this in order to help us, in order to help us take this mindfulness much more to heart. Serious. It's not some whimsical something he's putting out. And he's sharing this with us for us to take it, as he calls, take it to heart. We want to connect more with the transcendental. And why do we want to do that? So that the increasing degradation and duality in the material society will not disturb us to the same extent. Because what I say recently, Kali Yuga is in full blast. when we see and hear what's going on in the government and everywhere else. Mindfulness is a serious weapon that we want to share with you for healthy spiritual survival and even for material stability. Now that's the one that cares for you, that is putting this out and outlining so you can have expectations also that if you're hearing and imbibing and taking it seriously, this is what the outcome can be. You see how he makes that so very clear. So let's just look at the mindfulness practices he's done and think about, had you put any to work. I know I've really had a different perspective since beginning this chapter on what's happening in my world and how I am responding to it and how mindful I am. It's fascinating. I hope you're working on it. Now, first we spoke about mindful breathing. It's interesting, though. I started off very deliberate with this and determined. And here he says what happens when he inhale. He imagines drawing in love, serenity, knowledge, and bliss. And he says, as I exhale, I imagine releasing lust, anger, fear, and sadness. So that's practical, isn't it? We're all breathing. And for me, it's important because sometimes I get a little shortness of breath. But I'm finding I'm breathing easier, and I'm trying to remember and be mindful of my breathing. Because if you're imagining that you're drawing in love and serenity, knowledge and bliss, then whatever's going on in your environment, you've already accepted that these qualities are within you. And then he went out mindful walking, to practice mindful walking. And he mentioned practice. And he walked for hours. Of course, when I try to put myself in this position, I'm so thankful to be walking for 5 to 10 minutes. Although I walk with a cane, and for distances, like when I go to the temple, I take my walker. But I'm trying to be more mindful of how I step rather than fearing falling or how many steps it'll take to get to a point. I'm just trying to really focus on the walking itself and what's going on in the environment. Now he says he felt that the sun was shining to infuse my body with dynamic energy. And when I read that, I remember the day, it was nice sunshine here. And I went out walking right here in my area. The sun was shining, and I remember I was thinking, oh, it's hot in this sun. Let me find some shade. I didn't think it was energizing me. I just knew I wanted to get out of it for the moment. So that wasn't very mindful, but it's good to repeat and realize, and then you practice more carefully the next time. And he also noticed that, felt that the birds were chirping just to cheer him on and encourage me toward my destination. Now, I did notice the birds because they're back in full sway here and flying and chirping and all. But you see that mindfulness that they were chirping to cheer me on. So just listen and practice. The next was what? Mindful talking. I just hope those of you who've been hearing have been remembering this through the week in practice. So he says, I was extremely careful not to say anything to offend anyone. I imagined that each word was showering another soul, either with flower petals or brick. Being mindful of what you're saying when you're saying it, how you're saying it. He said he only discussed devotional topics. And therefore, I was feeling constantly enlivened as I reflected on all the glorious beings in my life. When you speak devotional things and realize that you don't have to stay in an environment where the conversation is not lifting you up or you're able to give something. What you can do, of course, if it's a work environment, you can't just walk out. But what I used to suggest, and used to be in environments like that, I would just turn off the conversation out there and chant inside and let the holy name vibrate through my mind. Or if it was in a break time or something nonsense, you could just excuse yourself. But try to use devotional words because they're like flowers as you're talking to others. And then what did he practice? Mindful hearing. Now he reflected, he says, I reflected on how all conversation is a call to participate in certain activities or to accept a certain mindset. Now he says, I chose to participate exclusively in devotional activities. We do have choice. You know, can't give that I couldn't help myself. We have choice. And he said to participate exclusively in devotional activities. And I only wanted to reflect on devotional topics. So whenever there were discussions that did not invite me to participate in devotional activity or reflection, I would simply excuse myself. Now what did he practice next? I found this one great. Remember? I practiced mindful eating. And then he mentions how when his disciples prepared wonderful food for him and have it ready when it's time to eat. And as I chewed each morsel, I thought of how each preparation was now spiritually surcharged. Why? Because it was offered to the Lord in prayer. And then the Lord made his remnants available. So he thought of how each preparation was spiritually surcharged, and that by taking such food stuff, my body was being fueled with spiritual nourishment. You thought of that when you sat down to a plate of prasada? Then I thought, he says, of how each grain, each mouthful, was giving me the power to improve the quality and quantity of my meditation and prayer. This was one that was helpful to me. I don't watch TV, but what I had started getting in a habit of doing when I would get my plate of lunch or even breakfast, I would bring it here to my desk and have the computer on, and I would read the news or go through my email or check out what's going on, plus eat. And my excuse for that was, I just eating. I didn't see it in this mindful way. But after this reading, I go to Ishkan Desire Tree, and I find a sadhu or swami and put on a class. And I'll tell you, the one where I've been going is to Burjan, because she has an overview of Bhagavatam, Canto, starting with Canto 1. So now I'm hearing, and we just talked about hearing devotional. I don't have anyone here to discuss with. I'm not out that much socially during the day. But I'm hearing. So now I sit at my table. I hear from Srimad Bhagavatam, and I'm trying to be more mindful of each mouthful of prasada. Okay, so please pay attention to what we're doing. Now, today, no, we haven't gotten to today yet. Mindful seeing. Oh yes, today is the 11th. 3-4 was last Friday. Yeah, okay, that was last week. Yes, the question?
Yeah, what class were you speaking of just now?
That I listened to? Burjan on Ishkan Desire Tree, where it says Prabhuji's, you go there, and then I go down to Burjan, and then I go down to Overview Srimad Bhagavatam, or Srimad Bhagavatam Overview. And I click on Canto 1, which has been exciting. Of course, what encouraged me to do that, I've been group of ladies here 4 days a week, meet and read from Canto 1. We're now in Canto 1, Part 2. So I'm hearing devotional material while I'm being mindful of eating my prasad. Okay? Who asked that?
David.
Who?
David.
Okay, David. Now we then practice mindful seeing. I reflected on how all things are composed of different energies of the Supreme Lord. That is, either his superior, marginal, or separated energies. This allowed me to feel Lord Krishna's presence constantly. Then I made a point of reflecting on the fact that everything I observed was coming from Krishna and should be offered back to him. Have you been out there moving and doing mindful walking and hearing and realizing everything comes from Krishna? Gradually I recognized everything in creation as being a part of the Lord's universal form. Oh, check that burner, the incense water. Is there water in that burner? I want it to dry out. Gradually I recognized everything in creation as being a part of the Lord's universal form. Thus, things I would normally see as uninteresting, grotesque, or frightening began to take on a far more meaningful appearance. Wonderful? Sights that ordinarily engendered lust or fear in me no longer bothered me. Instead of seeing them as objects of my enjoyment, I saw them all as aspects of the divinity. And this is important. I've noticed that sometimes out walking, traveling, and looking at a scene and realizing that that particular scene or vegetation or nature thing, only God could make it so beautiful. Only God could give it that shape. Only God, you see, it for me, it makes it more God conscious, if you will, being mindful. Sights that ordinarily engendered lust or fear in me no longer bothered me. Instead of seeing them as objects for my enjoyment, I saw them all as aspects of the divinity. You know it says, always remember Krishna, never forget Krishna. And if you're seeing from that mindful perspective, you will follow that. Now, with this new vision, I understood all captivating members of the opposite sex to be transformations of Krishna's beauty. And I no longer felt resentful of their radiance or inappropriately attracted to them. Soon, I adopted this attitude toward everything that spoke to my senses. Instead of getting agitated by trying to enjoy an experience, I saw each subject or environment that allured me as a display of Krishna's splendor. Later, when I returned to the temple and looked at your picture mindfully, I saw you beam an effulgent smile and say, "Well done, my darling, well done." The author's commentary is, when we have in our possession the property of another person, we then see ourselves as a caretaker. And as caretakers, we want to care for the property in a way that would please the owner. Actually, by reflecting on God as the ultimate, supreme owner, we will put forth more of an effort to care in a way that would please Him. Hope you're getting it. Everything belongs to Him anyway. However, instead of properly honoring the property of God, sometimes we want to own something in the environment, and therefore we exploit, manipulate, and try to enjoy in a sovereign way. Or we might use our philosophy to try to deny the beauty in the world. But it's not healthy to constantly proclaim proprietorship or deny existence or beauty. Beauty does, in fact, exist, but we can see it in an even more glorious way, as an aspect of the source of beauty. And Krishna, we know, is declared all attractive. His name is attractive. And we've said many times in our scriptures, and He Himself tells us in Bhagavad Gita, He's the creator of everything. So beauty is there. beauty does in fact exist, but we can see it in an even more glorious way as an aspect of the source of beauty. Then we can honor and appreciate it without the mindset of exploitation. Now, sometimes people engage in devious behavior after seeing the improper actions of another person, which then disturbs or agitates them, causing them to lose their balance. However, we can examine our environment in a scrutinizing way in order to relate the objects in our surroundings to divinity. I remember I used to use the expression, there's good in everything. In fact, Bhakti Tirtha Swami used to tell us that. Look for the good in everything, because everything comes from God, so there has to be some good. And he told us it may not be easy, but do it. And if someone is even acting obnoxiously, or they just might have a good, nice hairstyle or something, a pretty shirt on, and tell them something. You can find something there if you want to. Of course, you can find other things too. Then we will constantly speak divinely. You see, we examine our environment very scrutinizingly in order to relate the objects in our environment to divinity. So we're mindful. That mindfulness is very important. And alert. And then we will constantly speak divinely, hear topics that relate to divinity, and constantly see divinity around us. Consequently, we will respond to stimuli according and evenly share and relate to others in that particular mood. For instance, if someone is fearful or uptight, they will constantly codify the world around them according to their own particular mentality. Even their actions will result from that particular mindset. On the other hand, a person who's very loving will draw others into their mood because that mentality permeates throughout their thoughts and actions. And they then share that with others. Okay? So it's like we're kind of responsible for what's going on around us based on what's going on within us. And he tells us, Bhakti Tirtha Swami, so often to look inside and check out what's going on. Today, his next verse, he says, I practice mindful reading. As I peruse different scriptures, I no longer read as if scanning a novel or ancient history, nor did I read as if studying mere philosophy or theology. As I read each chapter, I saw every section as a peephole into the spiritual realm. Then I would study the subject more closely and reflect on all the phenomenal activities taking place in the spiritual kingdom. And my gosh, At Srimad Bhagavatam. We're in chapter, Canto 9 now here at Awacha. It's fascinating. And of course, if you just read the Krishna book, it's so sweet, the different stories. And then that gives you something to reflect on. The author continues in his commentary. Most people read such material in a light mood and simply view it as ancient history. At best, they might see the scripture as some type of philosophical exposition. Mindfulness means, you perked up, right? She's really trying to get this. Mindfulness means going beyond philosophical speculation, religious cognition, mental gymnastics, and even just rituals. It means, what means? Mindfulness means accessing the deep spiritual essence present in all our scriptures. So one has to be mindful. It's getting, when you sit to read and study, and I found even listening sometimes to a class, my mind will wander off and I'll say, where are you going? Get back here. You need to be mindful and go deeper, and it's there. Deep, mindful reflections far surpass mental and intellectual experiences. Deep, mindful reflections far surpass mental and intellectual experiences. We will no longer read the scriptures as a novel or as a historical account that simply explores philosophical, epistemological, and cosmological considerations. It means that the scriptures will act as catalysts for rich experiences. If you thought of that when you pick up a Srimad Bhagavatam, you're going to have a real rich experience today and get to the essence of what this is about. That's why sometimes you can't just stop at reading the translation. You get into Srila Prabhupada's purport, and he spells it out step by step. Makes it so exciting. So, the author continues his meditation. All of a sudden, before I could stop myself, I began to weep incessantly because I understood that no matter how much I pondered these writings, I was not yet qualified to interact with these great entities, nor could I fully comprehend them, communicate with them, and participate in their pastimes of adding to the Supreme Lord's pleasure. All this made me feel incredibly unfortunate as I pondered the irony of coming so close to the spiritual world, yet still remaining so far from its residence. I wept in agony, thinking, why have I been brought to the dinner table, but then not been allowed to eat? How could I be brought to the very tip of the window but then only allowed to window shop. What is the value of all these mindful practices? I cried. If I must continue my existence in this gross material body. His commentary continues. Sometimes in our spiritual growth, we experience the dark nights of the soul or periods of acceleration in which certain events in our life entice us and make us want more and more. We may begin to feel, I have come this close. Why can't I come closer? This is the nature of true spiritual unfoldments. When you feel nourished, you want more. And when something happens in your life that excites you, you also want more. And more of the same. You become more avid and eager for the next experience. This is spiritual life. On the other hand, when nothing happens, you lose faith, experience boredom, and begin to dabble in so many areas because that energy has to go somewhere. At this point, a person will remain superficial and not deeply delve into any area. Consequently, he or she will not have rich experiences. So as he said earlier, this mindfulness concept is very important. We should take it to heart. We should practice it every day. Those who are having the deeper experiences are the most desperate because such experiences entice them to the point of wanting more and more of these experiences. This is the nature of the soul, which is Sat Chit Ananda Vigraha, or full of knowledge, bliss, and eternity. And again he quotes from Krishna in Bhagavad Gita 7:5. Krishna says there, beside these, O almighty armed Arjuna, there is another superior energy of mine which comprises the living entities who are exploiting the resources of this material inferior nature. So he's pulling us, he's showing us that spiritual life, we're to have wonderful experiences, but we have to use techniques and technologies. And one he's describing here is this mindfulness. He continues, although the Lord emanates so many separated features of his different energies, he tells us of his higher nature and its relationship to the Atma or the soul. The ultimate destination of the soul is where? I know you all know that. You've raised your hand. It's in the spiritual kingdom. That's the destination. In this meditation, one is coming so close to the experience, but still wants to experience so much more. As the living entity unfolds unlimitedly, he or she does not have to leave the material world in order to experience transcendence. You hear that? while still in these bodies. By practicing the proper spiritual technologies, we will begin to understand past, present, and future. By practicing the proper spiritual technologies, we will begin to understand past, present, and future, and begin to have experiences beyond the gross material realm. Again, my mind goes back to this spiritual mentor, spiritual guide, spiritual guru that I have been fortunate to have been brought to this lifetime, who formed the Institute for Applied Spiritual Technology and gave us proper spiritual technologies so that we could have experiences beyond the gross material realm. And if you've been following these readings, and if you care to go back to some, we're all on Krishna.com TV. You go to audio and then you go to TV. I think there are 80 of these classes. Can you imagine? Over 2 years. But it's to practice. Did you notice as we were reading these mindfulness exercises, he said, today I practice. Practice makes perfect. This is not whimsical material coming at you. It's strong, powerful methodology to help you have higher experiences and to really be preparing yourselves for the ultimate goal and destination. We will begin to have experiences in connection with the spiritual dimensions, which will entice and stimulate the consciousness even more, because such experiences are the natural activities of the soul. The soul, which has been in a dormant state, becomes so happy to connect with the stimulus. Due to this excitement, it wants more and more, as it is. Gradually, due to this excitement, it wants more and more as it gradually regains its eternal happiness and experiences. One develops a genuine disgust for the material body that has its limits and restrictions and is incarcerating the soul. And I think I'm going to stop there. He goes on for quite... But this, to me, all of us have gotten quite a bit. This time period we've spent together, if we're truly hearing, if we're truly desiring greater spiritual experiences, as we have to, are bound right now in this material world to be interacting in the material energy. But he's given us many techniques. So let's stop here. Let's promise ourselves we'll be more mindful. And as I ask often, if you would write down any experiences that you notice by practicing has brought some change in your life, in your consciousness. You want to see if it works. And you can't see if it works unless you're practicing. and being mindful of what's going on based on your practice. So, any questions, any comments? Anybody else in the chat room?
Yeah. Manjay, Shruti, and Thomas.
Oh, Manjay, Saribo. Been a while. And Thomas? Oh, is
And
Thomas
Shruti.
new? Don't remember the name. Are you new, Thomas, here? Spiritual Warriorship. Hi, Shruti. Welcome.
He was here last week from New York City.
Okay, welcome again. Have any of you had any mindfulness experiences? You notice how he talks about the experiences that we have by being mindful in our different areas in our lives. Do you remember? Because as I said, I started out the first week we got into this chapter. I was so excited. The next day, I was gung-ho mindfulness. I practiced my breathing in the morning. I was breathing in and breathing out. And you do. Other things start coming up and you forget. But if you practice, it'll come back to you and you say, oh, I want to watch that. And just being out walking, you all walk out there and you move so fast, you may miss a lot. But just be aware of the Supreme, what He has presented to us, and how we can use it to glorify Him and move on. So, any comments, any questions?
Bhuva Moha says, thank you for an absolutely wonderful class, Patanjali.
You're so kind, Bhuvan Maha. Are you practicing mindfulness? I think you are, based on some experiences you've written about. But please, practice makes perfect, and this is what this is about. And it's to take us to a higher level of consciousness. To experience, and it's in the experience we have the realization. You can say, this is real. Okay, thank you for your thank you, Bhuvan. Anybody else?
Yeah, Thomas says, whenever I forget myself, my wife reminds me to be mindful.
Okay, good. And the more you practice, and you remind her too, I'm sure, if she forgets to be mindful. Wonderful practice. This is really, really wonderful. Because what it is to reawaken the soul. And the soul gets excited by the experience we get from practicing, seeing the divinity in everything and treating people at the divine level. Okay, anybody else? Any comment?
Manjay says, I will try my best to practice mindfulness for this week and forever.
Forever. Great. Do you have the beggar book? Don't forget, this is one meditation from Bhakti Tirtha Swami's Meditation 2 book. He has 4 meditation books out. So, if you can get it, I'm sure you can get it at Krishna.com or at harinamapress.org. And try to collect his books and read them and study them with the techniques and technologies he has for becoming a truly strong, powerful spiritual warrior and seeing the Supreme in everything and everybody. It'll make your life really exciting. He talks about the excitement of experiencing. And I thank you for being there. Anybody else? Any comment?
David says, Hare Krishna, thank you again.
Thank you for being there, David. I hope you're remembering and practicing. This is what it's all about. That's why I'm here to help trigger your memory and your consciousness to practice these wonderful technologies given us, which will increase your Krishna consciousness. And I like the phrase when Prabhupada talks about become fully Krishna conscious. And that's possible this lifetime. And we're fortunate to have such a teacher to give us these. Thank you for being there. Any others? Okay, mindfulness, breathing, walking, seeing, talking. Have a wonderful, blessed week, and we'll meet again. Hare Krishna.